The binding of Isaac, also known as the binding, recounts the story found in Genesis 22 of the Hebrew Bible. In this biblical narrative, God instructs Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac, on Mount Moriah. As Abraham prepares to carry out the command, he binds Isaac to an altar. However, before Abraham proceeds with the sacrifice, the angel of the Lord intervenes, and a ram appears as a substitute, which Abraham offers instead of his son. God commends Abraham for his devout obedience. This biblical account has garnered significant attention and commentary in traditional sources of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as well as in modern scholarship. Biblical account. According to the Hebrew Bible, God commands Abraham to offer his son Isaac as a sacrificial offering. As Isaac is bound on the altar, an angel halts Abraham's action, proclaiming, "Now I know that you fear God." Abraham then notices a ram caught in the nearby bushes, and he sacrifices it instead of Isaac. The passage states that this event takes place on the Mount of the Lord in the land of Moriah. The passage states that this event takes place on the Mount of the Lord in the land of Moriah. In 2 Chronicles 3:1, Mount Moriah is referenced as the site of Solomon's temple. Similarly, Psalms 24:3, Isaiah 2:3 and 30:29, and Zechariah 8:3 use the term the Mount of the Lord to refer to the location of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, which is believed to be the Temple Mount. The Samaritan Pentateuch interprets Genesis 22:14 as in the mountain the Lord was seen, with the mountain referring to Mount Gerizim. Jewish perspectives. Lippmann Bodoff, in The Binding of Isaac, Religious Murders and Kabbalah, argues that Abraham never intended to sacrifice his son and believed that God did not truly desire him to do so. Rabbi Ari Kahn expands on this view on the Orthodox Union website, stating that Isaac's death was never a genuine possibility for Abraham or God. The commandment given by God was specific, and Abraham understood it precisely. Isaac was to be raised up as an offering, and God would use this opportunity to teach humanity once and for all that human and child sacrifice are unacceptable. This interpretation aligns with the understanding of the sages in the Talmud, Ta'anit 4a, who categorically assert that such behavior never crossed God's mind, specifically referring to the sacrificial killing of Isaac. Despite the disturbance and horror experienced by readers of this narrative throughout generations, there was no miscommunication between God and Abraham. The thought of actually killing Isaac never entered their minds. Maimonides, in the Guide for the Perplexed, presents 2 significant ideas derived from the story of the binding of Isaac. Firstly, Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac demonstrates the limits of human capacity to simultaneously love and fear God. Secondly, the story exemplifies how prophetic revelation holds the same truth value as philosophical argument, carrying equal certainty even when presented in dreams or visions. In Glory and Agony, Isaac's Sacrifice and National Narrative, Yael Feldman argues that the story of Isaac's binding, both in its biblical and post-biblical versions, including the New Testament, has had a profound impact on the ethos of altruistic heroism and self-sacrifice in modern Hebrew. Rabbi Louis Ginsburg, in Legends of the Jews, suggests that the binding of Isaac serves multiple purposes for God. It tests Isaac's loyalty compared to Ishmael's, silences Satan's accusation that Abraham only served God because he had not sacrificed anything after Isaac's birth, and demonstrates to the world that Abraham is a truly God-fearing man, prepared to fulfill any commandment from God, even sacrificing. In response to Abraham's question about why God subjected him to this ordeal, God explains that it was intended to make the world aware of Abraham's devotion and to justify God's choice of Abraham above all other nations. This event serves as a testimony to humanity that Abraham truly fears God. In approaching Ginsburg's work, it is important to exercise caution, as his attempt to create a cohesive narrative from multiple sources may give the impression of a more unified rabbinic commentary tradition than actually exists. Ginsburg's work does not encompass the diverse midrashic interpretations of the Akedah and how they catered to the different needs of various Jewish communities. For example, in the medieval Ashkenazi version, Isaac is resurrected after the intended sacrifice, potentially reflecting the context of the Crusades as suggested by Spiegel. The book of Genesis does not explicitly mention Isaac's age during the event. Some Talmudic sages suggest that Isaac was 37 years old based on the subsequent biblical account of Sarah's death at the age of 127, with Isaac being born when she was 90. The biblical narrative does not provide details regarding Isaac's emotional reaction to the binding. Some commentators argue that he was traumatized and angry, pointing to the absence of any further interaction between Isaac and Abraham. However, John D. Levinson observes that the biblical text does not depict them engaging in conversation before the binding either. In Jewish worship, the narrative of the sacrifice and binding of Isaac is traditionally read in synagogues on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Some communities, following the practice of the Kabbalists, recite this chapter daily immediately after Birkat HaShaker. In Christian views, the binding of Isaac is mentioned in the New Testament's epistle to the Hebrews as an act of faith. It recounts how Abraham, in his faith, offered up Isaac as a sacrifice, believing that God could even raise him from the dead. This is seen as a figurative representation of the sacrifice and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Early Christian interpretations sometimes aligned with Jewish understandings of the binding of Isaac, with Hippolytus of Rome emphasizing Isaac's willingness to sacrifice himself for the sake of the world. Other Christians of that period viewed Isaac as a foreshadowing of the Word of God, prefiguring Christ. Symbolism and contextual elements, such as the 3-day journey and Abraham placing the wood on Isaac's shoulder, support this interpretation. Additionally, God's repeated emphasis on Isaac being Abraham's beloved and only son aligns with early Christian beliefs about Jesus. While Isaac asks about the sacrificial lamb, Abraham's response hints at God providing the ultimate sacrificial lamb, as later proclaimed by John the Baptist in the New Testament. Soren Kierkegaard, in his work, describes Abraham's actions as emerging from the pinnacle of faith, leading to a teleological suspension of the ethical, suggesting the profound nature of Abraham's obedience in the face of such a challenging command. Muslim views. The Quran presents a different version of the story compared to Genesis, with two key differences: the identity of the son to be sacrificed and the son's reaction to the request. According to Islamic sources, when Abraham informs his son about the vision, the son willingly agrees to be sacrificed in obedience to God's command, and there is no mention of binding him to an altar. The Quran states that God granted Abraham a son characterized by forbearance when he asked for a righteous son. This son is traditionally understood to be Ishmael. When the son grew old enough to walk and work with his father, Abraham had a vision of sacrificing him. Upon sharing this vision with his son, the son willingly accepts to fulfill God's command. When both father and son have submitted their will to God and are prepared for the sacrifice, God informs Abraham that he has fulfilled the vision and provides a ram for sacrifice instead. God promises to reward Abraham and later grants him the righteous son, Isaac, along with additional rewards. Early Muslim scholars held different opinions regarding the identity of the son. One group believed it was Isaac rather than Ishmael, interpreting the verse that mentions God's perfecting his mercy on Abraham and Isaac as an indication of Abraham's closeness to God and the rescue of Isaac. The majority, however, maintained that the promise to Sarah was for a son, Isaac, and a grandson, Jacob, thereby excluding the possibility of Isaac's premature death. Despite the dispute, most Muslims believe that it was Ishmael and not Isaac who was intended for sacrifice. Muslims commemorate the submission of Abraham and his son on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. During this festival, those who are financially capable and participating in the pilgrimage sacrifice a ram, cow, sheep, or camel. The meat from the sacrifice is shared among the household, neighbors, and the needy. Eid al-Adha marks the culmination of the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca.
If you found this video enjoyable, please consider liking and sharing it. Additionally, subscribing to this channel will ensure that you receive more updates in the future. Thank you.